Welcome to the New Institute series on discovering servant leadership. In the series so far, we've provided a biblical framework for a life of Christian leadership. We've looked at faith, love, and service as a foundation for that life. We've reviewed the power model of leadership, which Jesus rejected, and the service model of leadership that embodies the teachings of Jesus. We've reviewed the characteristics of servant leaders, and we've looked at the key practices of servant leaders. In this lecture, we will look at organizational communities and institutional operating principles. A lot of good work can be done by individual servant leaders, just looking to identify needs as they occur. An awful lot is also accomplished by servant leaders who join an organization or form an organization and build it so that it can continue to do the Lord's work far into the future. An organization's life can last longer than the life of an individual. When it comes to picking a form of organization, any form of organization can be used to serve others. It can be a sole proprietorship, it can be a partnership, it can be a nonprofit organization, it can be a for-profit organization, it can be a government agency. It can be a social business, or it can be a benefit corporation known as a B corporation. The form of organization you choose to do your work may depend on how easy it is to get the resources that you need. For example, if you and your friends have resources, you may decide to start a sole proprietorship or a partnership. If you have willing donors, and you may be able to provide a service that you can charge a fee for, you may decide to start a nonprofit organization. If the best way to raise money is to issue shares to the public, you may start a for-profit corporation. And if you want to make sure that your shareholders know there are only one group of stakeholders you're going to pay attention to, you may want to start a social business or a B corporation. If the best way to get the work done is through a government agency, you may support legislation to expand the work of a government agency or start a new one and then get appropriate funding. The point is to pick whatever form of organization best meets the needs that you are addressing. If you just focus on meeting the needs of others, you'll find that the form of the organization need not limit you. There are, for example, nonprofit organizations that have formed for-profit businesses to supplement their income and create jobs. Bill Shore, in his book, The Cathedral Within, describes nonprofit organizations that have created for-profit businesses to create jobs for the poor, the disabled, or former prisoners who need jobs to start a new life. Meanwhile, social businesses are available as a form of for-profit corporation. A social businesses, the purpose of the social business is to address a social need or an environmental problem. So a social business could create a high-quality food product and sell it at a low price to help meet the nutritional needs of poor children. Or a social business could create a renewable energy system and provide that at a low price. It would help a rural community to establish an energy supply. Whatever money is made can be used to repay investors or to expand the business. One thing I think is important to understand at the beginning is that there's a difference between an organizational need and an organizational purpose. All organizations need to get resources, and they need to continue. They need to generate a surplus or a profit or continue to get legislative appropriations. But getting resources is not the purpose of the organization. The purpose of the organization is to serve others. The purpose of a Christian organization is to do God's work. Now, I know people in the for-profit sector who will say the purpose of their organization is to make money. I don't agree. If that were true, then the purpose of a government is to collect taxes, and the purpose of a nonprofit is to collect donations and fees, and the purpose of a university is to collect tuition. They all need to do that. They all need the resources to do their work. But that's not their purpose. Their purpose is to serve others. The purpose of every organization is to serve others. How will you measure the success of your organization? Well, of course, you need to get resources and so forth, but a Christian organization will not measure its success in terms of financial results. The Christian organization will look at the people who have been loved and helped, the critical human needs that have been addressed, the lives that have been changed, the lives that have been saved, the number of people who have actually fulfilled their potential and become all that God wants them to be, the number of people who have grown toward God, and the quality of the organization in terms of its being a Christian community. For thousands of years, people have come together to form communities for mutual support. And I think we're inspired by the words that we find in the book of Acts about the early Christian communities. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. My wife and I came across a Christian community like that in Myanmar. We met the Thang family, whose members are leaders in the New Hope Myanmar Church in Yangon. We spent a good deal of time talking to Esther Thang, a graduate of Pacific Rim Christian University, who was at the time leading the Pac Rim Bible Institute in Yangon. Esther said that in 2008, a number of their church members died of AIDS. They left their children behind. There was no one to care for them. So Esther's mother brought them home to the Thang family compound. A year later, Esther's mother thought she would set up a children's house because she knew members of the church, their families had needs that affected the children. She knew, for example, children were struggling in families of divorced parents. She knew that there were families that didn't have enough money to care for their children. And there were children who lived so far out in the countryside that they had no access to school. So they invited them in one by one, and very soon they had 20 children. The children's house had become an orphanage. Children ranged in age from 5 to 14. Of course, they provided food and clothing and shelter and school expenses and a lot of love. Esther said it was hard to give all the children enough attention, but she and two of her brothers and a cousin spent a lot of time with them and tried to tutor them so they could do well at school. 5 members of the family, 20 children, and of course Bible students coming and going. The Thang family compound was a very busy place. Esther laughed and said, "It's like a party every day." The goal of a Christian servant leader should be to create that kind of community in their organizations. That's what Cheryl and Ralph Broetje have done. They have built a business that's a Christian community. Broetje Orchards was founded by Ralph and Cheryl in 1968. Today, the company has 6,000 acres in apples and cherries, 2,500 employees in the state of Washington. They pack 28,000 boxes of apples per day, more than 5 million boxes per year. 75% of the profits go into their foundation, which they use to help people all over the world. The Broetjes have combined faith and business into a single mission. They want to honor 2 verses in the Gospel of John in doing the work that they do. Here are the verses. "You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last, and so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. This is my command, love each other." Well, as you can imagine, that passage has become part of their mission statement, which is to be a quality fruit company committed to providing fruit that lasts. They market their products under the name First Fruits. It all began with a dream. It was Ralph's dream. He was 15, and he was listening to a missionary from India talk about the suffering of children there. And his dream was to have an orchard someday that would make some money so that he could help these children. Well, he married his high school sweetheart, Cheryl, and in 1968 they borrowed money and bought their first orchard, and year after year continued to develop the orchard and pay off their debts, and everything seemed to be going according to plan, until one day in 1979, the people who showed up to work were a very different group of people. It may be because of the Iran oil embargo. The price of gasoline shot way up, and families within the United States that normally drove around and worked on orchards stayed home. It was just too expensive for them to drive. In their place, a group of young immigrant Latinos showed up at the door. The Broeches wanted to learn more, so they actually went to Mexico to learn about the in-migration of workers into the US. They met farmers who had basically been forced from their land. They weren't able to get water for their crops. The roads were bad. They really didn't have access to markets to sell their produce. And there was oppression and political violence. Ralph concluded it was really hard for people there to dream of achieving anything because the options were so few. He and Cheryl began to realize that this dream he had when he was 15 was becoming real. But instead of starting by serving children in India, they were going to start by serving their employees. Now, they knew that public sentiment was not in favor of immigrant Latinos, but they felt called by God to live the biblical principles they found in the Old Testament, principles they found in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. In Leviticus, when a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them. The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt. And the same message, really, in Deuteronomy. He defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow, and loves the foreigner residing among you, giving them food and clothing. And you are to love those who are foreigners, for you yourselves were foreigners in Egypt. The Broeches knew that this migrant style of life was not good for the workers or their families. So one of the first things they did was try to redesign the work so that they could provide more year-round jobs. They also built a physical community. They went out and built affordable housing and a chapel and a preschool and an elementary school for this new community. And they worked hard to train their employees so they could accept more and more responsibility and become leaders and managers themselves. The way they summarize it is they built a community that cares for the business that cares for the community. Now, it's a big business. It's done well. The profits have gone into the foundation, and they're now busy helping people all over the world, in addition to children and families in India. I've had the opportunity to meet Cheryl Broetje and spend some time talking to her and to hear her make presentations, and all of this impresses me a lot. I was especially interested and touched to learn that she and Ralph adopted children from India to be part of their immediate family. And they've also gone out of their way to find homeless people that they might be able to help, giving them the opportunity for training and for work. She mentioned one of the people that they found living under a bridge has come into the company, has worked hard, and is now one of their senior managers. That kind of community can be found really anywhere. A few years ago, my wife and I were visiting Chiang Mai, Thailand, a cultural center of the country. And we stayed at, I guess, the equivalent of a student hostel for older adults. It was a wonderful place. The staff was friendly, the food was good, the location was terrific, the accommodations were very, very simple, and the price was very, very low. There was a cross over the door, and in the hallway next to the cafeteria, there was a plaque of the Last Supper. We noticed there were some Christian missionary groups staying there. Well, we went out, walked around, and went to museums and art centers, and by the end of the day, we decided that our feet deserved a massage. So we inquired in the hotel, and they said, oh, well, there's a massage parlor down the street, around the corner, turn right. So we went there, and what we found was a group of women who had been prisoners. They were taught the art of massage in prison, so when they finished serving their terms, they could come out and they would be able to get a job, they'd be able to work. The massage parlor was founded by a Christian who wanted to give them a place to work. He also gave them a community. Massage started on the front porch. We sat and they washed our feet. And then we went inside and we found 4 or 5 other ladies massaging their customers. And they were talking and they were laughing and bantering, and the older ones seemed to be giving advice to the younger ones. And we discovered, yeah, it was a massage parlor, but it was more than that. It was a community. And pretty soon we became part of it, and we were talking and laughing and enjoying ourselves. So they did a good job on our feet, but they did more. They lifted our spirits. In his book, The Concept of the Corporation, Peter Drucker said that the big business corporation is the representative social institution of America. What he said was that its social function as a community is as important as its economic function as an efficient producer. More recently, Henry Mintzberg has talked about a crisis in organizations, and that crisis is the decline in a sense of community. So that's a problem because the sense of community is the social glue that binds people together for the greater good. It's that sense of community that says that our work is important and our colleagues are important and we want to know our place in the world. That should be important. Those are things that should inspire people. He said that sure, we need good leadership, but we need communityship. We need to look at the entire organization as a community because that has a huge amount to do with the success of the organization. Simon Sinek, in his book, Leaders Eat Last, said that leaders should form circles of safety within their organizations where people have each other's backs. He said in a strong community, people don't have to spend time and energy protecting themselves from each other. They know they belong. They're part of the group. They feel valued by their colleagues and cared for by their superiors. A circle of safety builds trust and supports innovation and cooperation. People share ideas. They share the burdens of the work. He says that's a real advantage for the organization. It's more effective in seizing opportunities and fending off difficulties that come in from the outside world. In addition to building organizations as Christian communities, servant leaders seek to lead their organizations as servant institutions. You know, over the last century, organizations have come to have a bigger and bigger and bigger impact on our quality of life. Institutions that truly serve others can really enhance the quality of life. So servant leaders make sure that their institutions truly serve. There are a number of operating principles that help servant leaders when they're responsible for the service of an entire institution. We'll talk about 8 of them. Reach agreement on the purpose and desired outcomes. Serve employees. Serve customers. Strengthen partnerships. Serve communities. Build and facilitate effective teams. Develop an effective board. And grow servant leaders. We'll take a look at each one of those in turn. First of all, reach agreement on the purpose and desired outcomes. What is your mission? What is God calling your organization to do? Why does your organization exist? Who are you serving and why? It's important to know where you're going. Robert Greenleaf emphasized the importance of a unifying dream. He said that it should not be the leader, but the idea or dream that's to the foremost in the organization. It's the idea or dream that unites the people. The leader is the servant of the dream, drawing people together to fulfill it. Simon Sinek, in his book, Start With Why, said that successful organizations know why they exist. The why is your purpose, your belief, or your cause. That should be exciting for you and for those around you. That should be why you get up in the morning and are excited about going to work. Successful organizations share their why, not just their how or their what. Next, serve employees. And I suggest you start by committing to the success of your employees the first day they start work. I'm sorry, I do not believe in putting new employees on probation. It makes no sense to me to say, we've been through this whole process, we've looked at all the applicants, we've interviewed, we've decided you're the best person, welcome aboard, but we're not really sure you're the right person or you're going to make it, so we'll just sort of stand back for 3 months or 6 months to see how it works out. That doesn't make sense to me. Make a full commitment to the new employee the day they start work. Do everything you can to help them to succeed from the very beginning. If they can't do the work, provide advice, provide training. Do everything you can to help. If they still can't do it, they may need to find a job somewhere else. But you should start with full commitment, serving and supporting your employees. There are, of course, a lot of ways to serve employees. Provide positive working conditions and appropriate equipment. Provide benefit programs that are specific enough to meet the needs of your employees. Provide opportunities for regular input from your employees. Provide training and continuing education. Provide individual development plans for each employee. Provide opportunities for promotion from within. Help your employees to do their best and grow in service to others. Next, serve your customers. Your organization was created to serve your customers, clients, patients, members, students, citizens. That's why you're there. Your purpose is to meet their needs. I think to do that well, you have to do a lot of listening from the very beginning. Listen to your customers when you're developing a program or a product to see whether you are in fact addressing their need. Listen to them as they use your program or product to see what's happening, what's their perception, what's their reaction, is it really helping them the way you hope it will be helping them? Report back to them on what you've done with the input you've received. When you have complaints, sit down with the person, the customer who's complaining. See if you can reach an understanding or a solution. Do everything you can at every stage to truly listen to your customers so you can serve them. Starbucks is a big internationally successful company. A number of sources have said that one of the keys to their success is that they're willing to sit down with people who complain. People who complain about their products or their store. Sit down, talk to them, listen to the complaint, ask them if they have suggestions. What would you do to make this better? And then they act on the suggestions as a way of improving their service. Next, strengthen partnerships. No organization exists without suppliers and vendors, and most organizations have donors or investors or creditors. You need to work closely with them as partners. Listen to your vendors so you understand their needs. Listen to your donors so you understand them and you can help them to fulfill their values and their dreams through support of your organization. Provide accurate information for creditors and investors and the general public. Your organization depends on the cooperation of many, many other individuals and organizations. You can't exist without them. You cannot fulfill your mission without them. So work closely with them, build partnerships. Johnsonville is a sausage company. They decided that they would send some of their employees on a regular basis to the stores where their sausages are sold. They want their employees to go there and meet store employees and watch customers and see how their sausages are displayed and try to understand the impact of pricing and advertising and packaging on the customer. That helps Johnsonville, it helps the store, and it helps the customer. It's a partnership that's working for them. Next, serve communities. Your organization should have a positive impact on the community in which it is located. Try to understand the needs of the community and then work with individuals or organizations to try to help meet those needs. Encourage your employees and business partners to provide expertise to the community. Provide time off for your employees to provide community service. Do whatever you can to support the community. A for-profit business can make a difference that way just as any nonprofit or a government agency can. Years ago, I was invited to give a workshop in Estonia by the Tolaram Group. Now, the Tolaram Group originated in India, is now headquartered in Singapore, and does business in other countries such as Estonia and Nigeria. They are serious about corporate social responsibility, and they make sure that they are doing something in each community in addition to providing jobs. So in Estonia, for example, they have a program working with developmentally challenged children to help them learn and play and enjoy music. In Nigeria, they have a program where they give artificial limbs to people who have lost a limb because of illness or an accident or a birth defect. That's part of their total commitment to the community. Vicki Pryor was CEO of an insurance company in New York when I first met her. The idea of that insurance company was to provide financial services to working people and the less affluent. They felt that all people should have access to high-quality insurance products at a fair price, along with good customer service. Vicki is a Christian. She believes that God has given gifts and talents to everyone, so she embarked on a strategy which is to train and empower her current employees because many of them had been hired from the community they were trying to serve. And that worked. So these employees then were able to serve their neighbors. They were able to make a living serving the communities that they came from. So the community was lifted with jobs and with financial products. As the company evolved and grew, a culture of service and volunteerism grew up. They surveyed their customers and found that the customers rated them 95% satisfaction year after year. The employees became involved in fundraising walks and food and clothing drives and community service days. They surveyed them as well and found that 87% of their employees were so happy with the company they planned to stay there through to retirement. Next, build and facilitate teams. Marvin Bauer was a managing partner at McKinsey & Company for 16 years. Looking back at the end of his career, he said that he thought that businesses could be managed most effectively by networks of leaders. Leadership teams could do a better job of managing than the traditional hierarchical command and control structure. Wilkes said that servant leaders serve best when they team up with others to accomplish the mission. So what are the advantages of teams? Well, there are a lot of them. Teams work better than individuals because they have the resources, the ideas, the energy of more people, not just one. They don't rely on the strengths of just one person. They rely on the strengths of many people. Having various team members means different points of view. It means team members can take the blame and share the credit. It means that they can hold each other accountable. Above all, Wilkes said, teams are how Jesus did ministry. Jesus taught us not to be hierarchical, not to lord it over others. Well, teams are a great way to flatten the hierarchy. Of course, a team may have a facilitator who makes sure that the team is effective. But in a team environment, everybody's ideas can be expressed and shared and taken seriously. The team is not hierarchical in the way that it operates. In today's world, it is very hard for just one person to know everything that needs to be known to make wise decisions in an organization. Team members who are committed to the organization and to each other can make wiser decisions than any one individual. Next, develop an effective board. Every corporation, for-profit or nonprofit, has a board. And by law, the board has all the legal authority to manage the corporation. To manage effectively, a board should initiate, it should lead, it should not just rubber stamp the decisions of the administration. Board members should be thought leaders. They should be in touch with social, economic, environmental, political trends. Above all, they should be servant leaders who understand the needs of those the organization is serving. Board members come from a diverse set of backgrounds. They have a passion for the organization, its mission. They are willing to contribute a significant amount of time, talent, and treasure to the organization's success. They introduce the administration to new ideas, connections, and resources. Board members are team players, but they're not afraid to speak up. They can ask provocative questions and create a climate in which people can reflect and discuss major issues. Finally, grow servant leaders. The key to implementing all these operating principles is simple. You need to have a lot of servant leaders. That's why servant leaders grow more servant leaders. Start by looking for servant leadership characteristics from job applicants. For example, the Kendall Corporation is a company that runs retirement communities, and they've decided that they're going to ask each job applicant to read about and discuss servant leadership during the application process. After hiring, train people in servant leadership. TD Industries, a specialty construction company in Dallas, makes sure that their new employees are trained in servant leadership within the first few months on the job. When it comes to performance review, make sure that servant leadership practices are included among the competencies that are part of the consideration for compensation or promotion. One example is the United States Veterans Administration, which has designed a 360-degree assessment tool for their leaders. And it's full of servant leadership practices. That's the way they designed it. They're going to use this tool with 20,000 Veterans Administration leaders. Finally, when you're developing servant leaders, make sure that servant leadership is embedded as part of the organizational culture. Make sure that leaders of the organization model servant leadership. There are a lot of people who won't understand what servant leadership is until they see a servant leader in action. In summary, any form of organization can be used to serve others. Whatever form you choose, it can become a Christian community. That Christian community can be a servant institution focused on serving customers and society at large. There are institutional principles that guide servant leaders as they lead their organizations to truly serve others. Those guiding principles can help them to enhance the quality of life and advance the kingdom of God. Would anybody like to ask a question? Yes.
Yes, when it comes to community service, do you find the best approach is basing it in the circumstances of the community or basing it on what the company providing that community service actually does?
You know, my preference would be to try to identify the community's needs as the community defines it, and then, you know, do whatever you can. And if that really doesn't match what your organization is able to do or can do, perhaps a financial donation or whatever might be used instead. But I think it needs to start with the community's needs and then see how you match up with that. How about another question? Oh.
Yes, Dr. Keith. Suppose I'm a mid-level manager, or I come into in the marketplace, I come into a mid-level manager position, and I'm in an organization or a business that goes by the power model and does not reward servant leadership, but rewards the power model. How can I change the culture? Or if not, is there a point in time where I need to look elsewhere?
That's a good question, and it's hard to say, except in each situation, it's a difficult judgment to make. But I would start by trying to do the things that servant leaders do, and see if you can work with your immediate team or your immediate unit and create a kind of authentic servant leadership environment right there. It seems to me that when you do that, you'll be successful. And if that's the case, then either they'll leave you alone or they'll come and say, what are you doing? Maybe we should do more of it. I think it's tough when you're surrounded by people who are in the power model to use the service model. But I think the people who appreciate the service model most will be the people in your team. And there are some studies that show that the people who have servant leadership behaviors really are supported by people who want to work for a servant leader, and sometimes they move them up the ladder because they want to move up with them. So sometimes it's a very positive experience. But even when it's difficult, I think you can create an authentic subset of the organizational culture for yourself. How about another question?
What would be the 3 steps that you could do to have a community that would serve?
Wow. That's a challenging question. Well, I think you have to start by paying attention to people. You have to show that you are paying attention. And I would start within the organization and begin to build a sense of community there. And with that as the base, I think you could look out to the larger community and say, you know, we benefit by the way we care for each other. Can we now look at ways to care for the larger community? So I would start inside. Pay attention to people, try to get people things that they need, connect with each other, get to know each other, get them working together, and then say, well, this is good, but now how can we expand it, use this as the base and move out into the larger community? That was 2 steps instead of 3, but that's what I recommend.